Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is December 6th, 2023. My name is Monica Driggers, and I'm the Senior Program Director for the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. I want to welcome you to the Dam Busters 101 Luncheon Series, a collaboration between the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance, the Charles River Watershed Association, and the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. This educational program offers basic information about dam removal to managers from municipalities and nonprofits that may be considering such projects in the future. We are presenting a total of 11 in-depth presentations by expert speakers on different dam removal topics. For the series topics and exact schedule, please visit the Mass Rivers Alliance website at www.massriversalliance.org. Note that the series is not intended to advocate for the removal of any particular dam or dams. Today's webinar is on funding a dam removal project. The next webinar is about community engagement for dam removal on January 10th, 2024 at noon, so please mark your calendars for that. A few housekeeping items. Number one, this session is scheduled to end at 1 p.m. Two, please either put your questions in the chat, which Mass Rivers staff is tracking, or hold them until the last half hour's Q&A session. Three, please put your name and affiliation in the chat. And fourthly, note that these webinars are being recorded. Recordings and any other webinar materials will be made available on the Mass Rivers website. Lastly, we ask that you please complete the evaluation survey that will be sent to you after the webinar. The evaluation is really important to us. It's helping us improve and possibly expand the series. And now I'm delighted to hand things off to Beth Lambert of the Division of Ecological Restoration to introduce today's topic and speakers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Beth Lambert, Director of the Division of Ecological Restoration, as Monica just said. It's wonderful to see you all here today. Welcome back to this webinar series. Today's topic is fundraising for dam removal projects. We're going to hear from 4 panelists, each of which has experience both overseeing grants to communities and organizations for dam removal, and who are also practitioners and have been involved in dam removal projects themselves in various ways, through technical assistance, through guidance, through project management, and other ways. The 4 panelists we're going to hear from, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the 4 panelists, and then each of them will give a short presentation on a grant program that they are involved with, which funds dam removal projects. After they each give a short presentation, we will then have a panel discussion. And I'll ask the first few questions of the panel while you all in the audience are thinking of your questions. Once you've thought of your questions, please enter them into the chat in the Zoom. You'll find the chat at the bottom of your screen. And when we switch to the audience questions, then Monica and her colleagues will be taking questions from the chat and asking them of the panelists. So that's the plan. So the 4 panelists that we have today are, in order in which they're going to speak, are Chris Hirsch. Chris is the Division of Ecological Restoration's Dam Removal Program Manager, and he'll be speaking about DER's Priority Projects Program and one other source of funding. Chris comes to this panel with around 6 years of experience in dam removal. Prior to working at the Division of Ecological Restoration, he worked for the Neponset River Watershed Association, doing a wide range of habitat restoration projects, community engagement, science, and outreach activities. Then we will hear from Bill Hinckley. Bill Hinckley works at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He oversees the Dam and Seawall Repair or Removal Grant and Loan Program. Prior to that, he was Executive Director of the Massachusetts Environmental Trust, which is another grant program. Also in his role at EEA, He oversees and coordinates grants across the Commonwealth throughout the executive office's various programs. Third, we'll be hearing from Carolyn Norkowitz. And Carolyn works for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. She serves as the Greater Boston Regional Coordinator for that program, and she's been in that role since 2019. She brings deep experience overseeing grants and working with local project leads to help them plan and implement restoration and adaptation projects. And then lastly, we'll be hearing from Brian Kelder. Brian is an aquatic ecologist. He has expertise in river and coastal ecosystems, both the science and the restoration of those ecosystems. He works at the NOAA Restoration Center. NOAA provides a wide range of grants for habitat restoration projects, including dam removal. So in his role with NOAA, he provides funding and technical support for river and wetland restoration projects in the Gulf of Maine. So I'm excited that we have these 4 panelists here today. Each of them brings unique expertise and deep experience writing grants themselves, reviewing grant applications, and overseeing grant programs. So to start, Chris Hirsch will be speaking, and he will be talking about the Division of Ecological Restoration's Priority Projects program and how that program supports dam removal projects. So Chris, I will hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Beth. I'm just pulling up my presentation now. Is everybody seeing my slides? Excellent.
Yes.
So thank you all for coming today. As Beth said, my name is Chris Hirsch. I'm the DER Dam Removal Program Manager, and I'm here to talk about 2 of our support opportunities. I call them support opportunities because they're a little bit different than sort of a traditional grant program, some of which you'll hear later today. Our 2 support opportunities are our dam recon studies and our priority project program, which Beth teed up for me. These opportunities vary in when they're offered. So dam recon studies are typically offered annually, and we put out an RFR for that different times of the year, usually in the spring. And then we also have our priority projects RFR, which is offered sometimes annually, sometimes every other year. The dam recon study is a program for early phase and planning support for dam removal projects. It's targeted for people who own a dam or are interested in removing a dam, municipalities or private entities that are seeking more information at the very early stages of that planning process. So it may be people who are interested in removing a dam, or people are seeking more information before making that decision on whether or not to remove the dam. Right now, we've been using state funds for that from the SHMCAP program, State Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Program. And that program is really focused on municipalities. So lately, the applications have been limited to municipalities. That doesn't mean that private dam owners can't participate. That just means that they'll need to work with their local municipality to have the application come in under the municipality. That isn't always the case. So in the past, we've used our capital budget or other funding sources to support this program. So you're going to want to double check the RFR and read that in detail when it comes out if you're thinking of applying for this, just so you understand the applicant requirements. You may or may not need to work with your municipality. The support that this program offers is a feasibility report, conceptual design program, sediment testing and evaluation, and then an opinion of cost for a potential project. The reason that I say that our programs are a little bit different than a traditional grant is with dam recons as well as priority projects, what you're really applying for is a status. And so if your site is selected as a dam recon site, that means that you're eligible for funding. So typically a dam recon study will be between $25,000 and $50,000. That the grant, the funding aspect of it, and as well as the contracting is all handled by DER. We encourage the dam owners to be involved in the process, but they don't need to actually administer these grants. The funds never exchange hands. DER takes on the responsibility of hiring the consulting firms to do the actual work, and they administer those contracts with the consulting firms. The applicant for this, in this case, would get the final reports, the design plans, opinions of costs, etc. And the last thing that I'll say about this specific opportunity is that at the end of the year and when the project concludes, that's sort of the end of the agreement, which is different than the priority projects, what I'm going to describe next. And there's no obligation for the dam owner at that point to move forward with dam removal. And there's also no guarantee that DER will be involved with the project any further than that. Although we do encourage and welcome former dam recon sites to apply to be priority projects. So that's next. The priority projects program is sort of the core of our program, or I'm sorry, our project work at DER. They are voluntary and proactive dam removal projects. We're talking about dam removal today, but there are other practice areas that we have, or program areas, including coastal wetlands, freshwater wetlands, former cranberry bog restoration, culvert replacement. That, well, I guess culvert replacement wouldn't come in under priority projects, but the point is that we have other areas than just dam removal, but projects that are selected for priority projects, again, this is a status that you would be applying for. And if your project is selected as a priority project, you're eligible then for technical assistance directly from DER staff, technical assistance contracts administered by DER on behalf of the dam owner, and then direct funding in the form of grants. In this case, any dam owner can apply, or a dam owner's representative. But at this point, we really require there is a commitment to dam removal. With the recon studies, it's okay if you haven't fully committed to dam removal to apply for those programs. But if you want to be a priority project, you need to demonstrate that you've committed to dam removal and you're interested in pursuing that avenue. What you get as a priority project is DER joins your project team as an official partner, and a project manager will be assigned to the project, and they will help guide you and the project through the entire process from start to finish. So it's a little bit different than the recons in once you have that status, unless something catastrophically changes with your project, we are in it with you until that dam is removed. In addition to that, the dam removal project is then eligible for technical assistance contracts and direct funding grants, the amount of which varies depending on our budget allocation as well as what the project needs are. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is a few tips for success. So first, our division's mission is to restore the environment for both communities and the environment. And so emphasizing both of those in your applications to DER would go a long way for you. There are a lot of tools available that the state has, including the DER restoration potential model tool, Mass Mapper, the state's EJ Mappers tools that can help you to describe what those benefits are. And then also, you want to be able to apply any local knowledge you have that really makes your project stand out and is unique. The next tip I have is to really demonstrate community and local support as much as possible. It's always helpful to do some of that work in advance of an application to DER to show that you have a committed team behind your project. These projects can be highly controversial sometimes, and if you can show that you have support, that will go a long way. And the last piece of advice I have is to think about the bigger picture and demonstrate how your project fits into either larger plans or into your larger, wider watershed context. And I've provided some links to some of the resources at the bottom of my presentation. I'll pass it over to you, Beth.
Thank you very much, Chris. That's very helpful. And I would just add that at any one point in time, the Division of Ecological Restoration typically has 30 or more dam removal projects in planning through the Priority Projects program that Chris mentioned. And as those projects reach construction, DER then takes on new projects so that we have a continuous pipeline of projects underway at any time. Now I will move on to Bill Hinckley, who, as I mentioned before, works for the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, where he oversees the dam and seawall repair or removal grant and loan program, and has prior experience overseeing grant programs as well. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Beth. And I don't actually have a slide today. I hope to be very brief so we can allow the most amount of time for questions later. My name is Bill Hinckley, and I'm with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And one of my roles here is to administer the dam and seawall repair or removal program. I'll just call it the dam and seawall program for our time here. The dam and seawall program is fundamentally a safety program. And our primary goal with this program on the dam side of the program is to help and ensure that dams are in compliance with the dam safety regulations that are promulgated by the Office of Dam Safety with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. One way to bring a dam into compliance with those regulations is through a removal project. But I should note that the program is open to both repairs and to removals. Because it's a safety program, we have a prioritization process that reflects that. The Office of Dam Safety has categorized all 3,000 dams in Massachusetts by a number of different mechanisms, and one is what we call a hazard classification. Those hazard classifications are based on the potential damage that could be incurred downstream were the dam to fail. So their regulated dams fall into one of three categories: high hazard, significant hazard, or low hazard structures. Those that are not regulated are called non-jurisdictional, and those are not considered to be a severe safety hazard. For the purposes of this program, we only work on dams that are regulated by the Office of Dam Safety, and we have the strongest priority for those dams that are classified as high or significant hazard classification dams. Low hazard class dams are eligible, but they are much lower priority. We also prioritize projects based on the physical condition of the structure. Again, these classifications and ratings are based in the dam safety regulations. Those classes that we prioritize are called poor or unsafe condition dams. Other dams, again, may be eligible, but they're going to be a lower priority than those high and significant hazard dams in poor and unsafe condition. So in terms of applications, who is eligible to apply? We are open to municipalities and to nonprofit organizations and to other instruments of government. So it could be a water district, for instance. Those are eligible applicants. With these grants require a 25% local match. And I'll tell you that even though many of us are here today to consider the ecological benefits of a dam removal, which there are many, the ecological benefits for this program are secondary to the safety benefits, which is the primary thrust of this program. So we have two upcoming grant opportunities. The first, they typically come out around the same time for two different parts of the dam repair or removal process. The first one is for design and permitting. These grants are available for up to $250,000. They're intended to advance designs and to help to move your project through the permitting process. We typically prefer projects that are farther advanced in design, so you already know you've already identified the project and you've identified the preferred solution. So this typically, what you've already done at this point is a feasibility study, which will indicate that your preferred alternative is the removal. This program will then help you to advance through the permitting and design phase. The second opportunity is for construction. This would be for a project that is well advanced through the permitting phase and in fact has some of its permits perhaps already in place. At a bare minimum, this project that would be coming in would have already been submitted to the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act Office, or MEPA, for review. So again, these grants are up to $1 million, again with a 25% match, and again for construction purposes. I will say that these grants are very competitive. We typically are oversubscribed by about 50%, and so it's a highly competitive program. Let's see what else is notable. This office also has a loan program. That RFR will be coming a little bit farther down the line. The loans from Energy and Environmental Affairs can be used for a repair or removal of a piece of infrastructure. They are typically 20 years, depending on the rate may be variable, but is up to 1/2 the prime rate. So right about now, it's about 4%, give or take, which is a pretty competitive rate. The benefit to this is that all of our grant programs are on a reimbursement basis, which means you need to pay for the project and the work before you can be reimbursed by the state. With a loan, you'll receive the funding up front, and then it is up to your municipality or your agency to then administer that fund as necessary. Again, it's a 20 years. The loans are administered by the Clean Water Trust. This is the same agency that would administer your drinking water state revolving fund or your clean water state revolving fund, and they would typically even come on the same bill. I will probably stop there so Carolyn can talk about the MVP program, and I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to the Q&A period.
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm starting to see some questions for our panelists showing up in the chat. Please keep the questions coming, folks, and we'll make sure we have time to get to them. So next up is Carolyn Norkowitz. As I said before, Carolyn is the Greater Boston representative of the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program and has a strong involvement and engagement in that program's grants, as well as working with local partners and applicants. Carolyn, over to you.
Thanks, Beth. I do have a few slides, so I am gonna share my screen. Let's see. How's that? Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for the introduction, Beth. Again, my name is Carolyn Norkowitz. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the MVP regional coordinator for the Greater Boston region. I will be talking about our funding program today, specifically zeroing in on dam removal projects that we've supported. And those of you in the Neponset River Watershed Association will recognize all of my pictures because they're from the dam removal in Norwood that we supported a couple of years back. So the MVP program, many of you may be familiar with it already, but just to recap our overall programmatic goals, we really seek to build climate resilience across the Commonwealth at the local level, hence the municipal part. So we are working with cities and towns on developing climate adaptation plans, as well as implementation projects. So what is climate resilience? We know that can be somewhat of a buzzwordy term. So here's what we mean when we talk about climate resilience at the MVP program. To us, climate resilience is the ability of a community to address the needs of its built, social, and natural environments, to anticipate, cope with, and rebound stronger from events and trends related to climate change hazards. So resilient communities don't just recover, they are continuously building capacity to reduce the impacts of climate change. So you kind of might already see where I'm going with this in a dam removal presentation. We really see, dam removal can be a very strong resilience strategy in responding to the increased precipitation that we are seeing as a result of climate change. Removing a dam can eliminate the risk of dam failure and restore river flows so that it can increase flood storage over the long term. So we really see it as a long-term more resilience fix here. But dam removal is just one of the many, many different kinds of projects we fund. I really enjoy working for a program that looks at resilience so broadly, anything from different social resilience projects to to more in-depth planning, to community outreach and engagement, to nature-based solutions such as dam removal. Speaking of which, our funding decisions are all based around how well a project and an application incorporates our 10 MVP core principles, which those are all here on the screen and they are on our website. I won't read them all, but I will highlight that we do look at projects, again, that employ nature-based solutions. So again, working with nature to address the climate change hazards and adaptation needs that we have, as well as projects that really reflect community need. So this echoes some of what Chris was talking about earlier. We're really looking for projects that have strong community backing, that the priority came from the community members. We are a ground up program. That's how we want to be supporting climate change adaptation at the local level. And we also seek to fund projects that improve equitable outcomes for environmental justice and priority populations. So at the state, we define an environmental justice population as a certain percentage demographic of racial minority, language isolation, and low income. But priority populations is a term that we're using to kind of identify that an expanded definition of folks who need extra support when it comes to adapting to climate change hazards. So rooting projects in equity and in community need and include community engagement are really critical needs for our program. So what are the nuts and bolts of our fiscal year 25 funding round? So right now, through December 15th, so through the end of next week, if you are in a municipality or looking to partner with a municipality on a project, we are accepting expressions of interest. So these are a quick form. We even redid it from last year. It's even shorter now, just to tell us your project ideas. And then that will allow us as a team of regional coordinators to review that idea, talk about it, and then provide you with feedback on that idea. So throughout the winter, we'll be setting up meetings with folks that we get expressions of interest from to talk with those ideas through. In the springtime, usually around late March, early April, we release our RFR for fiscal year 25. Applications are typically due in early May. And then by late summer 2024, we are able to announce those award decisions. I will note that it is not required that you submit an expression of interest in order to then submit an application. I know some programs work like that. Ours is just a mechanism for talking with us. So even if you miss that December 15th deadline, please reach out to us to talk about your project. Although we do encourage you to submit the EOI because that allows us to discuss internally and provide you with more substantive feedback than just a one-on-one conversation. But if you want updates on our timing and our funding timelines, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. So I know you'll be getting these materials, and that's the link to our newsletter that we send out. I promise it's not too annoying. It's like on a quarterly basis, and then reminders of important dates. Beth asked us to think about what are some tips for applying for one of our grants. And my number one tip is please talk to us. I am one of 6 regional coordinators located throughout the state. You may know your regional coordinator already, but if you don't, please do reach out and say hello by talking to us about your project idea. We are happy to be a thought partner in helping you develop that project, in connecting you with potential project partners. Even if you don't work for a municipality, but maybe you work for a community-based organization, or you're a resident in town and you're just looking to better understand our program, please do reach out and we can try to connect you with a municipal contact that's relevant to you. Our funding does have to go to a municipality or another political subdivision of a commonwealth. So that could be a storm or a water commission or sewer commission or something like that, as well as federally recognized and state acknowledged tribes. So that there's a few more nuts and bolts there, but we really want to be having conversations with you. So I will leave it at that in anticipation of more questions to come in the panel. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Greatly appreciate it. There was a comment as you were speaking from Catherine saying that the MVP newsletter is in no way annoying and that it is a wonderful newsletter. So everyone should definitely sign up for it. Thank you, Catherine, for letting everyone know that. Okay, so last but not least is Brian Kelder. As I said before, Brian works for the NOAA Restoration Center and has broad expertise in river and coastal ecosystems. Brian, over to you.
All right, I will try to make this quick so we can get on to the fun question part. So I work for the Restoration Center, which is within the NOAA Fisheries Office of Habitat Conservation. So the Restoration Center is a very small shop within the very large organization of NOAA. There are 4 of us, or 3.5 of us, I guess, that work within the state of Massachusetts, or partly within the state of Massachusetts. We support partner-driven restoration projects, including dam removal, primarily through NOAA's community-based restoration program, which provides funding and technical assistance for projects that ensure fish have access to high-quality habitat. So the goal of these projects is to recover and sustain fisheries, particularly those species that are managed by NOAA Fisheries or those listed as endangered or threatened under the ESA, the Endangered Species Act. So again, I work for NOAA Fisheries. So to be a good fit for assistance through our program, through the Restoration Center's grant programs, a project must provide meaningful benefits to diadromous, aka sea-run fish species, or marine species, or those native to the Great Lakes, which doesn't apply here in Massachusetts, but that's our freshwater coast that we also deal with, the Great Lakes. We can provide both technical support and funding to any and all phases of a dam removal project. So from concept through implementation, much like DER can. And when we provide funding, again, similar to DER's program, we expect to be an active contributing member of the project team. So you'll get somebody like me at the table with somebody like Chris or your other funders, your other existing project team. Though our level of involvement and the type of involvement is going to vary based on the needs of your team and the complexity of the project. we do not have to be providing funding. Like past funding will still stay involved, or before you don't have to be funded by us to have involvement if it's a project that fits our have at least kind of planning involvement. If it's a project that fits our is in our wheelhouse, I guess I should say. Our level of funding has been evolving greatly in the last couple of years. So since its start in 1996, the community-based restoration program, I'm just giving you these numbers for scale, provided about $217 million to 2,200 coastal projects, many of them dam removals, though not by no means are those all dam removals. But since the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, those numbers have significantly increased, because those two laws have given us the availability to support roughly $1.3 billion in projects over the next few years, including last year. Last year, we were able to award about $390 million nationwide, and this year we have current competitions open that may award up to another $495 million. So our scale has changed, at least for the time being. So our awards are bigger, and there are more different funding opportunities out there. The current funding opportunities that we're administering, there are 4 main ones, and 3 of those are closed for this year, and 1 is about to close in a week and a half. So if you're not already applying, you're probably not getting in the door for this year. But we expect similar opportunities to roll around again next year, though the numbers may be different associated with them. All 4 of those could have dam removal as a component, though 2 of them are really kind of directly aligned with dam removal. And I'll just mention those 4, and I'll put a link in the chat for the page that describes these in detail, rather than going into a lot of detail here. But we have the National Fish Passage Program, which this year was about $175 million, with awards from 1 to 20 in scale. That is fish passage, connectivity projects. Dam removal is a perfect and preferred fit, though dam removal is not the only method that can be used. The Tribal Fish Passage Program is very similar, except it is only federally recognized tribes, tribal organizations, and Alaska Native corporations are eligible to apply for that specific opportunity. And that awards funds for fish passage projects, as well as building tribal organizational capacity. And then the other 2 programs are transformational habitat restoration, which is for coastal resilience projects across the country that span a broad range of habitats and restoration techniques, but can include dam removal. And then the last one, which closes in a week and a half, is the habitat restoration for tribes and underserved communities. This year was a $45 million program, with 20 million of that set aside specifically for federally recognized tribes through direct awards or subawards, and the other 25 million with broader eligibility to include tribes, underserved communities, or entities that partner with tribes or underserved communities. And again, that could include dam removal as a component, but doesn't need to. And then I would just say that I don't have much to add on the tips. The tips that other folks already gave are pretty much what I had listed here. But I would say, I guess, specific to the federal scale of our programs, and the way we evaluate proposals, these federal proposals can be pretty big and cumbersome. I would just say, if you're applying to a grant like ours, pay attention to the objectives, and pay very close attention to the evaluation criteria. So the funding opportunity will be specific on how many points go to each evaluation criteria. Don't overlook that. Make sure a reviewer can easily understand clear answers to each criterion, even if you feel like you know, it's don't gloss over one because you don't feel like you have a great answer. Answer them all the best you can and be clear about that, or you'll leave some points on the table, which could be the difference between getting funded and not getting funded. And don't leave match or leverage unclaimed. So our programs right now aren't requiring match, but match and leverage can help your proposal. So if you have in-kind local match or something like that, any amount, you should quantify whatever you can and describe it in your proposal. Sometimes that gets glossed over, or people say, oh, it's not required, so I don't need to talk about that. And I would say probably for many programs, but definitely for ours, you know, cover that. Don't leave that on the table. And I think just in general with any grant program, know your audience. And understand, understand whether you're going for, like Bill's program, that is more focused on public safety risk, ours, which is more focused on fisheries, or some other one that's more focused on something else. But tell us about all those other components, because in ours, you're going to get points for that public safety piece. We care about that, but you need to have the fish piece. So understand your audience and highlight the things that your audience clearly is asking for. And with that, I think I'll give it back to Beth, and we'll see if we can answer some questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian. Before I leap into the questions, I just want to highlight a couple of themes that I've heard from our panelists. One is the importance of understanding the purpose of the grant program you're applying to. So in the case of Brian's, there needs to be that link to coastal fisheries. You heard from Bill Hinckley that there needs to be a link to dam safety. So understanding the purpose of the grant program. Second, I heard a lot about technical assistance, project teams, and collaboration, and the importance of reaching out directly to the lead for each grant program to discuss a project long before you actually get to the point where you're ready to submit a proposal. So building that relationship and getting input from the grant program so that you can better understand how the grant program works, and also because these programs have very knowledgeable staff that can also provide input to the project development process. So I wanted to highlight those things to you, the audience. And so from what I'm hearing from these speakers, really the first step when you start thinking about funding is to contact the grant program directly and learn everything that you can about it by speaking with an actual person, as well as reading the materials that are online. So with that, I'm going to ask our panel a question, and then we will shift from there into questions from the audience. So my question for each of these panelists is, what other sources of funding have you seen dam removal applicants use to fund their projects besides your program? And I'm going to quickly run through the panelists in reverse order. So sorry, Brian, starting with you, what other funding sources have you seen dam owners or project leads use to fund their dam removal projects?
Well, I would say, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. I would say that, a number of those sources are sitting on the call right now. Certainly everybody on the call right now I have seen as parts of projects that we fund. Also, there are often opportunities through NIFWF, what's that, National Fish and Wildlife Federation. And many of those are federal funds that are directed through NIFWF. I've seen those used. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Fish Passage Program is another good one that is often paired with our funding. And then frequently there are private foundations or even just kind of private individual donors with interest in dams that people can leverage and sometimes utilize those to match state funds or federal funds when match is required. We also see a lot of projects getting portions through their town meetings when possible, when they're locally owned dams. But
Great.
cast a wide net.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you very much, Brian. Carolyn, do you have anything to add that Brian didn't mention?
I have nothing to add. I giggled because I was also trying to remember what NIFWIF stood for. I was like, there's that NIFWIF one, but Brian's got it. That's literally all the same ones.
Okay. Bill, how about you? Anything to add?
I have seen occasionally if municipalities have ARPA funding or the American Rescue Plan Act, sometimes that can be allocated. It's important to know that that's federally sourced money, so that cannot be used for federally sourced grants such as NOAA or in some cases MVP. I've seen corporate money from different corporations that have interest in the environment, and certainly philanthropic funds. And also funds allocated from town meeting.
Thank you. And then lastly, Chris, do you have anything else to add?
I can't recall if this was mentioned or not, but Mass Environmental Trust is another opportunity from the license plate program, as well as your local Trout Unlimited chapter. If you've got cold water benefits from your project, they like to contribute to these types of projects.
Thank you. And I would also add, occasionally, depending where your project is located, the wild and scenic rivers have funds which the stewardship committees may opt to put towards habitat restoration. So certain watersheds in the state, a project may be eligible for those funds. Okay, we are going to move to audience questions now. One thing I want to let everyone know is that we do have a slide in the closing and which will be posted to the website, which lists and provides links to the major funding programs that we've been talking about today. So you'll be able to use that slide as a resource to get to each of these agencies and programs to learn more. And many thanks to Bill for putting that slide together. All right, so I'm going to hand it back over to the Rivers Alliance, and Monica or Anna will be moderating questions from the audience.
So that's me. I'm up. We've had a lot of great questions that have already been posed and answered in the chat. I'm going to try to get to the ones that I think have not been answered yet. The first one was to Chris from Stephanie about the timeline of decisions for the most recent RFR.
I can't really talk about it since it's still under review, but it is in process.
Okay. And then we have one in the Q&A about matches for funding programs. Can they be in kind or do they have to be in all cash? And I'll direct that to each of you. Maybe let's start with Chris.
Our programs do not require match, so neither in kind nor cash, but we do appreciate match.
Okay, does anyone else have something to add, like Carolyn or Brian or Bill?
Ours are both cash and in kind.
Likewise, cash and in kind. And each program is going to have, depending on any program that you're going to look at, is probably going to outline very carefully in the RFR what is acceptable for match. Note that the federal requirements tend to be more stringent than the state ones. And in general, part of the evaluation of match does look at how the project is going to be completed. And in that way, as often as not, cash is king.
Great.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, Brian.
Sorry. I was just going to say that right in the past, I know that NOAA has and may again in the future required match on grants. Right now, the opportunities that just closed did not require match, but again, match was part of the application. So and we in our current round are looking at match and leverage together. So it could be leverage could be from federal sources, which is different than things have been in the past. But yeah, cash and in kind would both count there. You just specify what, and also things you've applied for versus you have in hand. Again, they will weigh a little differently and as how sure those things are coming in the door, but list them all. If the opportunity says you can.
Okay, Brian, well, as long as you were talking, I have another one for you. This one is from Kimberly. It's what entities are eligible to apply for the Restoring Fish Passage through Burial Remover grants?
So that this round of that grant is closed right now and under review. It was very broad eligibility, so it basically any project proponent could have applied. That's just off the top of my head, but it was very broad. So private owner, municipality, NGO, tribe, you name it. The key thing is you have to have the dam owner on board. You're not going to get funded to remove a dam if we don't know the dam owner's on board, but it would not have to be the owner as the applicant.
Okay, the next question is sort of for everyone. From combining grants, which we touched on earlier, to fund larger projects, how do you recommend managing different timelines of RFRs, announcements, and tight fiscal year timelines? Does anyone want to speak to that one?
Yeah, that's a big challenge for these types of projects, because all of the different funding sources do have different timelines that they operate on. We're very strictly tied to the fiscal year with our funding, and that's raised challenges. I know we've worked with MVP and had challenges with that in the past, particularly when your projects have phases like permitting that may not be under your control completely. My advice would be try to stay as organized as possible. Gantt charts are very helpful in organizing timelines with multiple components, and just really read and reread those grant contracts so that you fully understand what the timelines are.
And I would just add to that be realistic with your timelines. So build in some buffer to the extent you can, because some of those grant funds will expire if things get kicked down the road. So if you're too optimistic with your timeline in an application for funding, you're gonna wish you weren't at some point. It may actually affect whether or not you're competitive in the application too, because the reviewers will say, well, there's no way they can get that done in that timeline. So be realistic in your timelines in an application, understand how flexible those funding timelines are, and cross your fingers.
I also note that, a lot of what the dam removal program is science, but what you've described here is in fact the art of dam removal. And experience, unfortunately, is sometimes the best. And there are people out there who have a lot of experience with doing this, who can help you to line up the different funding sources and calendars. But also, it's very important when you are actually in the process of undertaking your dam removal project to make sure you're allocating the cost correctly across the grant. So if you've got a federal grant, a state grant, and something local, you need to very carefully outline which program is paying for what, so that you'll know when it comes time to submit your reimbursements and your pay requisitions, to make sure that you've allocated correctly across that. And again, this is truly the art of grant management, and it's very difficult. And the more funders you have, of course, the more conflicts you'll find in those different timelines. But it's very important just to make sure you're allocating everything correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Making sure spreadsheets are your friend, that you're saving invoices and correctly determining, as Bill just mentioned, which grant program will be paying for which invoices. Just again, keep talking to your grant whoever that grant contact is. And we are happy to work with you on organizational strategies for making sure that you're gathering the right documentation that we need on our end to process your reimbursement, or, you know, whatever the grant process may be.
Yeah, and that conversation with the funder is key. An early conversation, as early as you see something coming up, is critical. There are sometimes opportunities to reallocate where you're spending grant funds on that are going to expire to still move the project down the road, and that's very hard to do if you wait too long. So keep that conversation open.
Great. We have a couple more questions, which is probably might fill the time we have left. This one is from Jillian and it's for Brian and for Chris and maybe for Beth. What type of impact data do you find most valuable in assessing grant eligibility? How much should dam owners and removal advocates spend on collecting data that doesn't exist from state or federal agencies? Should we invest time and money in fish counts and water data monitoring, et cetera? What else is important?
Yeah, I would say fish count data, if you can demonstrate, especially in a migratory system, that the fish are there and that the barrier really is the stressor that's holding the ecosystem back. I think that can go a very long way for a project. I'm trying to think of other data that would be worthwhile, you know, looking at the connectivity of the whole system, looking at how many miles would be opened up by removing the dam, what the current condition of the river is. All of that information is really important context for us to understand what your opportunity is. And I would say when you're filling out the applications, this is really your opportunity to tell a story and to sell your project. And so, you know, the more information you have, the more local knowledge, the more you can talk specifics about your system and your project, the better it will be for your.
And I would say, if I understood the question correctly, it sounded a little bit like it was asking how much to go out and collect. I would say, I agree with everything Chris said. I would say focus on gathering gathering and distilling the information that exists for a grant application, rather than going and spending money and time collecting new information to apply for money you don't have yet. So gather, like, know the watershed, give us context on what's going on upstream and down, like Chris mentioned. If there's work going on up at the next barrier upstream, or there might be work going on at the one downstream, set the stage with that fish count data that exists. Don't go out and try to find, you know, money to do a research project to make your case for a funding application. I think that I wouldn't spend my time and effort on that personally.
I would agree with that.
Okay, great. Last question, and it's actually a little bit of a two-parter. It's about how you guys rank eligibility or assess eligibility for these projects. The first is, if you're doing a dam removal in Massachusetts, but it has benefits in another state, does that get weight? And does the fact, if a small town is applying with limited resources, would you factor in the financial resources of a community in evaluating awards?
I can start there. In terms of the interstate benefits, the MVP program, not interstate per se, but we do look at regional benefits of a project. So if the benefits will extend beyond just the boundaries of that one municipality that is applying, and if it's a dam removal, chances are it probably will. Then that is something that we want to know. We want to hear about in the application. Telling that whole story is really important. And in terms of financial resources, yes, one of the elements of our scoring is around the state's. The state has a number called the EQV, which is, I think it's population per capita per local budget or something. Someone else might be able to speak to exactly what that number is, but yes, we do consider community need.
We don't care what state you're in.
The benefit of being NOAA. Great, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add on that? I think we are at time. Okay, in that case, I want to thank our speakers for their excellent presentations and the information, invaluable information that you've provided. We will have follow-up resources on the Mass Rivers Alliance website. And if anybody has questions, please reach out to us at Mass Rivers. Thanks so much for attending today.